GM Brad Holmes has become one of the most recognizable and one of the most popular figures in Detroit Lions history. However, though, over the last couple of weeks, more and more fans are starting to accuse him and blame him for the lack of defensive production. The question is, do they have a point? We're going to talk about it in today's episode, folks, so stay tuned.
We used to be a team no one respected. We used to be a team no one feared. That was then. This is now.
First victory of the year on the line. Goff's got it. Back, looks, throws, end zone. Yes! Caught!
You know who we are.
10-5, end zone, touchdown Detroit Lions!
And you know where to find us. We won't be far. We'll be on your front porch waiting for you. We are the New Era Lions, and
we are driven by Detroit.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and we're diving in right now. As always, to those that are joining into the show and coming back, I just want to say thank you all for coming back. Thank you all for your view, your support, your patronage. Thank you all for everything that you do. It absolutely means the world to me. And to those that are tuning into my show for the very first time, I want to say thank you all for giving my show a shot. Welcome on in. Hope you enjoy the content. And likewise, I hope to gain your subscription if I've earned and deserved it. And with that having been said, I just want to say to all, God bless. Hope you all have enjoyed your holiday, and hope you all enjoy the show, and let's get into it. So, here's the thing, folks. When we take a look at the course of this season, when we take a look at the course of everything that's gone on so far, the season is a little over halfway done. Hard to believe, but it is. And the Lions right now are 8-3. Again, considering the Lions' history, if you will, especially the most recent history we've had, you would think a lot of Lions fans would be absolutely elated, just absolutely joyous beyond repose because of the fact we're 8-3 at this point in the season. But, however, though, that is not the case. We all know it's not the case. In fact, there are a lot of Lions fans that are extremely upset. They're disgruntled. They're disappointed about the Lions due to one simple reason. And the main reason is this: where the hell is the pass defense? Now, we have to understand something here. When I say pass defense, I'm talking about two different components here that kind of come together to make the formation of that whole singular word. And the reason why I'm saying this is because there's a problem with both the defensive back's ability to cover wide receivers, and there's a problem with the defensive edge rushers and the defensive linemen impacting the quarterback. So again, it's pass rush and pass defense kind of coming together here. And you have to think about it. There is absolutely a lot of evidence that supports this whole thing. When we take a look at this, the Lions defense this year has struggled to generate sacks and turnovers. Again, this is something that we did not see as much last year. Again, last year the Lions actually were somewhat decent at getting sacks and turnovers, especially towards the second half of the year. But right now, the Lions are just struggling to get any sort of turnovers. They're struggling to get sacks, and it's very, very prevalent. Again, at the time I'm recording this, this is what the stats look like. I know the stats are definitely going to change because obviously there are games that have not been played due to the fact that we play on Thursday and the rest of the league has to play on Sunday. That's why I'm saying, at the time I'm recording this, the Lions are tied 25th in turnovers. They only have 12, 8 interceptions to 4 fumbles. They're ranked 23rd in sacks with only 23. They're 14th in pressure rate with 22.4%. They're 25th in missed tackles, so they're near the bottom. That means they have almost some of the most missed tackles in the league with 71. They're ranked 28th in blitz rate at 20.8%, so they hardly, if ever, blitz. They're ranked 25th in pass defense in terms of total yards. They've given up 2,503 yards through the air this year, and they're ranked almost dead last in red zone percentage on defense with freaking 30th at 68.6%. This defense cannot stop anybody when it's absolutely crucial to do so. We can't get sacks, we can't affect the quarterback, we can't freaking get turnovers, and we sure as hell can't keep people out of the damn end zone. Again, it's a problem. It is a massive problem that everybody is now starting to come to the realization of, this is something that we should have been addressing quite a while ago. Hey, this is something that should have been getting a lot more attention than what it has at this point. And I'm telling you this right now, one of the main reasons that a lot of people are annoyed or angry about this whole thing is because Dan Campbell keeps trying to, as they would say, whitewash the situation and say, oh, well, it's not really a problem. The same guys that we had at the start of the year are the same guys we have here. We just need to clean some things up. We just need to get back to basics. Okay, I could understand that if this was maybe something that's been going on for a week or two, but it's not just a week or two. We have been very, very inconsistent the entirety of the year trying to get after quarterbacks. Apart from a 2-week span where we had 5 sacks in one game and 7 sacks in another, we have had a very hard time of affecting the quarterback on a consistent basis. So for me, it's one of those things where it has to be addressed. Now, I know I'm talking about the defense there quite a bit, but that's not the point and purpose of the episode here. The point and purpose of the episode is to take a look at this from a different component, which is Brad Holmes. Because you have to understand something here. What do all those stats that I just put out highlight? What it points out is there's a lack of a pass rush and or there's a lack of a competent pass defense in terms of cornerbacks and safeties. Now, I have been, and I will continue to maintain that, in my opinion, the primary blame for this lies at the feet of Aaron Glenn due to the fact that he is simply not either developing the players and bringing out their full potential to bear fruit, or he is simply not putting the players that he already has in a good position so that way they can actually perform well. However, though, as I highlighted already, a growing number of fans are starting to point the finger. They're starting to get angry. They're starting to say that maybe the reason why we're having such problems in this area is because of GM Brad Holmes, which, as crazy as that sounds, it's something that we're definitely going to examine in this episode. Because again, part of being a podcaster is to hear what fans have to say, hear what people are saying, and examine it. Actually give some investigative reporting to it in a sense, and actually see, hey, do people have a point to this? Is there some merit to this argument? So, we're going to take a look at this, and I'm going to try and be as comprehensive as I can, but at the same time, be as fair as I can. So let's take a look at this. The first thing we need to take a look at when we're talking about this is Brad Holmes' draft record, which is by far and large the strongest piece of evidence that we have when it comes to Brad Holmes. And I'm going to say this. I have said it before. I will most likely say it again, and I will probably say it again when we get to the future draft in 2024. But let's understand something here. Brad Holmes has drafted an immense, and I mean this, an immense amount of talent in terms of helping this defense out. Again, I've pointed it out several times. 23 draft picks, that's how many draft picks Brad Holmes has so far. 13 of those draft picks, 56%, have gone towards the defense. That's a majority. The majority of the draft picks that Brad Holmes has gone towards the defense. Now, that's just me being kind of like, saying, oh, well, that's just the specifics or the generalizations, pardon me, of what we have in terms of that information. Pardon me, my paper is just giving me fits right now. But let's further analyze just the sheer amount of talent and draft picks that has gone to either the defensive line or towards the secondary. Let's think about this for a minute. Brad Holmes has invested a first-round draft pick, 2 second-round draft picks, and 2 third-round draft picks on that defensive line. That's Aiden Hutchinson, Levi Onwuzurike, Josh Pascal, Aleem McNeil, and Broderick Martin. But then you take a look at the defensive secondary, safeties, cornerbacks. He's also drafted Brian Branch in the second round, Kirby Joseph in the third round, Ife Melifonwu in the third round, and Chase Lucas in the 7th round. Now, again, I'm not a mathematician, but that's 9 draft picks. Wait a minute here. I just said that the Lions had drafted 13 draft picks on defense, right? So 9 of those 13 draft picks have gone to somehow try and affect the pass defense game in some way. So 9 out of 23 draft picks, 39%, so almost 40% of Brad Holmes' draft picks have gone to somehow impact or improve the pass defense in some way. So think about that. Almost 40% of Holmes' draft picks have gone to help the Lions' defensive pass game in some facet. Now, I'm going to say this. Have all of those picks worked out? Absolutely not. Because again, we have to understand the nature of the draft. You're going to draft a player does not mean every time you draft a player, that player is going to work out. Because let's understand something here. Levi Onwuzurike, he continues to have injury issues. He has not lived up to his draft billing since we've gotten him. Either it's been issues with his hip, it's been issues with his back, or something else has come up to where he has just not been able to live up to the draft billing of which we gave him. Then you take a look at players like Ife Melifonwu and Chase Lucas. They have talent, but the problem is they're so buried on the depth chart, or they're being used in different positions than what they were originally drafted for. Melifonwu was drafted as a cornerback. Now he's playing as a safety. Chase Lucas is a cornerback, but he's so buried on the depth chart that he's being used more on special teams than he is being used on defense. So again, that also kind of plays into this. And then you take a look at Broderick Martin, the guy that we traded an immense amount of draft capital to go up and get in the third round. And how many snaps has he really had this year? Probably about as many as I can put on my hands. Maybe about 10. We've been through 11, 12 weeks into the season, and this guy that we traded so much for, we still have hardly seen him at all. So again, when you think about it here, there is a point to the fact that maybe some people are saying, well, maybe Brad Holmes didn't get the best players he possibly could have gotten when he drafted them. However, though, we have to understand the nature of the draft. You're kind of taking a gamble one way or the other because, as I've said before, and I'll say again, there is no such thing as a surefire draft pick. There is no such thing as a surefire draft prospect. You are taking a gamble one way or the other. Now, is it going to be less of a gamble on a higher prospect than necessarily on a lower prospect? Yes, but you're still not sure of what you're going to get until you bring that player into the building, they start performing, and you actually get to see what they're doing on tape. But again, here's where I'm going to kind of turn this argument back around here. To say that Brad Holmes is not doing his job to try and bring in talent to try and help this defense is sheer ludicrous from the draft record, because it's like, listen, Brad Holmes has brought in a literal crap ton amount of talent for Aaron Glenn and this defense to try and use to get better results. And to a certain degree, it has gotten better results. Again, go back to last year. Aiden Hutchinson led the entire NFL out of all rookies in sacks. Now, this year, Aiden Hutchinson is not getting as many sacks. But we have to understand something here. The guy is getting double and triple teamed. He's getting chip blocked, and there's nobody really else to help him out. That's going to lead us into a conversation later in this episode. But my whole point is this. To say that Brad Holmes has not been doing his job in terms of drafting talent would be sheerly ludicrous. So, that's the first aspect of this whole thing. Now we need to take a look at the other aspects of this, which is free agency and trades. Let's take a look at the free agency component right now. And let's be honest here. Up until this last offseason, Brad Holmes had hardly done much of anything in terms of free agency acquisitions for the defense, or hell, almost for the entire team. But we have to understand something here. Though, to be fair, that was not really Brad Holmes' fault. We hardly had any financial money to be able to do anything for the first 2 years because of Bob Quinn, our former GM's poor management. And think about it. When I mean poor management, I'm talking about the bad contracts that he handed out to players that literally saddled us with freaking cap for 2 or 3 years, even though they were gone. Such contracts for like Trey Flowers, Jamie Collins, Justin Coleman, Jesse James. Remember all them names? We still were paying for them almost a year or two after they had left into freaking Brad Holmes' era as GM. So he really didn't have a whole lot of money because there was so much dead cap on the books still. But this last offseason, Brad Holmes damn near invested almost $100 million in new contract money on the defensive side of the ball. Now, to be fair, again, I'm trying to be as fair and balanced as I possibly can here. Only 2 of the players that Brad Holmes brought in the offseason would be considered top-notch defensive talents that we brought in. And that would be C.D. Deuce, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and Cameron Sutton. Otherwise, really all Brad Holmes did in terms of handing out new contract money for defensive players was bringing players like Reeves Maben back after he had a 1-year hiatus, what I think was the Texans, getting Alex Anzalone back, which has proven to be a really great signing. But again, wasn't really going out and getting a new player. He was just handing out new contract money to that player. Also, bringing players back like Will Harris, or signing other players like Emmanuel Mosley, who's not really done anything to us because he's been injured except for 3 plays this year. My whole point is this. Some of the signings that he brought in, and re-signings you could call them, have been okay to great. But realistically, the main body of Brad Holmes' free agency acquisitions this year have not really done a whole lot, because you have to think about it here. Emmanuel Mosley has not been able to do much of anything. That's been pretty much, $4.5 to $6 million that's been just completely washed down the drain. When you take a look at C.D. Deuce, he's only been able to play for 2 games, and the rest of the time he's been injured with a torn pectoral muscle. So again, most of that money has not been able to bear any fruit. The only players that have really done anything from this new amount of contract money he's given was Alex Anzalone and Cameron Sutton. And right now, we don't know if Alex Anzalone is having a serious injury, because he left the game against the Packers on Thursday, and he did not return, and it looked like it was a left hand or a left wrist injury. The whole point of the matter is that the free agency acquisitions that Brad Holmes got this offseason have not really done a whole lot as to what we were hoping they were going to do. The acquisitions have largely been disappointing. And again, that's me being fair. Some of it has been okay, such as Cameron Sutton and Alex Anzalone. And again, C.D. Deuce has been a great leader, but that don't mean crap if you're not on the field playing. So again, I'm trying to be as balanced and fair as I possibly can here. Now, that's free agency and the draft. Here comes the one area where I know everybody is going to just absolutely want to crucify Brad Holmes for. The trade market, trades. This is by far the one area where Brad Holmes has come under the most duress, the most flack, the most criticism for not making moves when fans have considered it most prudent to do so. Because we have to understand something here. This offseason has seen that Brad Holmes could have made at least 3 big-time trades for defensive talented players. And Lions fans they were damn near begging Brad Holmes to make one of these moves. And the problem is Brad Holmes pretty much passed on them. We don't know if he bid on them or not, if he actually put an offer in. We don't have any concrete proof of that. But it would be interesting to know if that was the case, because I checked. As far as I knew, there was rumored interest that we had in these players, but there was never a report that we actually put in an offer for them. And what players am I referring to here? I'm referring to Jalen Ramsey, Chase Young, and Montez Sweat. Now, let's understand the nature of what was going on here. Jalen Ramsey, he was traded to the Dolphins from the Rams for a 3rd-round pick. Okay, that's not that bad, especially for a player like Ramsey's caliber. Take a look at Chase Young. Again, traded to the 49ers from the Washington Commanders, formerly known as the Washington Football Team, formerly known on top of that as the Washington Redskins, for a 3rd-round pick. Then you take a look at Montez Sweat, traded to the Bears from the same team, the Commanders, for a 2nd-round pick. Now, let's take a look at that whole analysis there, and let's think about this. All of those players that I just mentioned, Jalen Ramsey is a cornerback, Chase Young and Montez Sweat are both edge rushers or defensive ends, guys that can get after the quarterback with their pass rushing skills. They're all players that can and would impact the pass defense. Now, here's why this gets really bad for Brad Holmes. Because you have to understand something here. Like I said, Lions fans were begging, they were pleading with Brad Holmes to make a move, to pull the trigger, to do something to improve or bolster this pass defense before or during the current season. Because again, Jalen Ramsey was traded before the season started, but Montez Sweat and Chase Young, they were traded at the trade deadline. And here's the thing, like I said, there's no verified reports that we put in any bids, but there was definitely some sort of interest that seemed to have been out there, but nothing ever happened to it. Nothing ever happened to actually allow it to occur for bringing them here to Detroit. And you have to think about this. This is absolutely infuriating for Lions fans, because you have to think about it. The Lions' pass defense has been absolutely horrendous this year. There has been very little good about our pass defense. And you have to think about this. The current problems we're having right now, they were still there a couple of weeks ago before the trade deadline happened. So that's why this is really peeving off Lions fans, because it's like, listen, this is the same problem we're having from before the trade deadline. You had these guys out there that were affordable, in some people's opinion, to go and get. Why did Brad Holmes not go and do it? Because it's like, listen, Jalen Ramsey got traded for a 3rd-round pick. Chase Young got traded for a 3rd-round pick. Why not pull the trigger on them? A 3rd-round pick's not that much to ask for. But you have to think about this. This is where it gets even worse. The Lions have failed to register a single sack in 4 games this year. And if you think about that, there's only been 4 games where the Lions have registered 2 or more sacks. So if you think about it, out of the freaking 11 games we've played this year, or so, whatever it is, 7 or 6, I'm trying to keep the math in my head, we have only registered 1 sack or less, so 1 sack or none, in like 6 or 7 games. That means the majority of the games we've played, we're not impacting the quarterback. So when you have the ability to go out and get a pass rusher who clearly could help you in that department, Brad Holmes passes on it. That's why it's really irritating Lions fans right now. That's why they are particularly aggravated, they are particularly infuriated and annoyed about this. Because you have to think about it. Just to take a look at it from the Chase Young perspective, I know this for a fact. Ever since Chase Young got to the 49ers sack production has gone through the damn roof. If I recall correctly, they've had 15 sacks over the last 4 weeks ever since they've acquired him. Even if Chase Young is not the one getting the sacks, his mere presence on the field is causing offensive lines to have to account for him, opening up other opportunities for other players. So when you think about this, that is why Lions fans are now starting to point the finger at Brad Holmes. They're now starting to blame Holmes for not making trades or moves to improve the Lions' pass rush or pass defense overall, which is why I've said this has now started to lead to accusations of Holmes being either cheap or he's not willing to take risks to get the team better. However, though, again, to be fair to Brad Holmes, just like I'm giving air and credence to what Lions fans are saying, we have to take a look at what the issue of trading is from the perspective of the GM. There's multiple questions, there's multiple avenues that have to be looked at, such as, does the trade compensation equal the player, have a value that's equal to the player? Does the trade make sense? Is there roster space for the player? Can the team financially afford it? Is there someone of equal or greater value that's in free agency or in the draft that's upcoming? Is the player a culture fit for the team? Is the player a schematic fit for the team on whatever side of the ball you're potentially looking to acquire them for? Does the player have any issues that could cause extenuating factors for the trade? Again, these are all questions that the GM has to consider before they actually say, yes, I want to put in an offer for this player. Or if I'm actually going to put in an offer and I want to see it all the way through, and if I'm going to have to outbid somebody else. And we have to think about those questions when we start looking at these players. Because let's think about this here really quickly. Let's take a look at Jalen Ramsey. What were some of the problems with him? One, he has a big contract. Yes, his contract does get less and less as the years go by, but the very next year after this one, it's going to be like something like a $30 million cap charge for his contract. You have to think about this as well. He's 29 years old, folks. He's not going to be able to stay a top cornerback forever. He might have another year or two, and then he's going to fall off like a cliff. Then you have to think about this. He was coming off of an injury at the time when the Dolphins traded him. So you have to ask yourself, is he going to be able to come back at the same full strength as he was prior to the trade? And then the one that really kind of doesn't allow him to fit here with Detroit is the cultural fit, and that's because of the attitude. I know a lot of people are not going to be able to remember this, but when he was back at Jacksonville, he got into an argument/fight with his head coach on the sideline. It was a big thing to do back in those days because players are not supposed to do that. They're not supposed to get into public spats and fights and arguments with their coaches, and when it does happen, it is big news in the NFL. So that's why I don't think Jalen Ramsey got traded for the Lions. Then you take a look at Chase Young. Chase Young was probably the most likely candidate out of all of these three to most likely get traded. But you have to think about it again from Brad Holmes' perspective. Chase Young is either on the last year or soon to be last year of his rookie contract, which means there's a financial commitment that has to come on top of the trade compensation that you're potentially giving up. Then you have to take a look at Chase Young's injury history. He has had a lot of injuries over his short career in the NFL. So that's an extenuating factor. And then you have to think about this as well. The draft is literally in a couple of months. Do you not think that Brad Holmes could potentially find someone of equal or greater value in the draft? One of the things Brad Holmes has been really good at doing is finding good talent everywhere in the draft for good prices. So for me, it's like, is Brad Holmes really willing to give up a third-round draft pick when he could find someone of equal or better value with said draft pick? So that's part of the reason why I don't think that the Lions made the trade for Chase Young. Then you take a look at the last one, Montez Sweat. Again, he actually is on the last year of his contract, hence the reason why the Bears signed him to a new one. And it was a massive contract. It was like 4 years, $95 million. That's a lot of money. So again, I don't think Brad Holmes wanted to make that financial commitment on top of a second-round draft pick to acquire him. Then you take a look at it again, like I just said with Chase Young. Is there someone better in the draft or free agency? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I'm not the GM, but it's definitely something to consider. And then you take a look, like I said, the high draft trade pick that they had to give up, a second round pick. I've said it before, I'll say it again. You take a look at every damn trade that Brad Holmes has ever made as the GM of the Detroit Lions. He has never traded higher than a fourth round pick away. It has never happened. So for me, the highest I could see that Brad Holmes might be willing to go was a third round pick, which was why I say Chase Young could potentially get traded for. But again, there was the problem with his injuries. There was the problem with his contract ending soon. These are all things that I've said before, but a lot of people don't pay attention to that because they're just angry. So I will say this though, to be fair, once again, to everybody, while you could say that Brad Holmes was definitely being cheap or was not wanting to take a risk that could necessarily help out the Lions to get them better by spending draft capital or acquiring these players, you have to take a look at it from his perspective. He is trying to maintain the roster for long-term success, not short-term success. And in doing that, you have to take a look at individual player concerns. You have to take a look at what makes sense for the roster. You have to take a look at what makes sense long-term financially. And again, the reason why I'm bringing this up is you have to understand something here. Brad Holmes comes from the Rams. The Rams just got done literally trading everything they had to go for one damn Super Bowl. Great, they got their Super Bowl. That's glad for them. But you have to understand it from Brad Holmes' perspective. He's trying to build a sustainable program long term, not one that just literally has its moment in the sun for a season or two and then fizzles out. So again, for me, you could say that some of the problems are based on talent because of the fact that Brad Holmes has not gone out and gotten better talent when it was available. So yes, you could slightly blame the problems on Brad Holmes because of the fact that there were better immediate opportunities that were available that Brad Holmes could have gotten. However, you have to ask yourself this question. Would they have been rentals or would they have been long-term acquisitions? Could we have afforded them? Does it make sense, especially with the fact of, like I just said earlier in the show, all of the freaking players that we have drafted on that defensive line in that edge rushing department? Plus, on top of that, we have all these other mouths to feed that are coming up shortly. Jared Goff, Jonah Jackson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Penei Sewell. Do you really want to add another veteran to that's going to take up even more cap space? Or would you rather trust Brad Holmes, who has done very, very well in the drafting department and finding good players for cheap that's going to help spread out the cap hits over the years? Because you have to think about it. Take a look at all the players Brad Holmes has drafted that have really bolstered and helped out this roster. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Penei Sewell, Aiden Hutchinson, Aleem McNeil, Jamison Williams, Brian Branch, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs. Every single one of them has made contributions to this team, and to try and get them at veteran value would absolutely bankrupt this team right now. But because we've got them on rookie deals, it works out for the team. So again, it's a constant balancing act. I'm not saying that to say that Brad Holmes couldn't have done better or couldn't have gotten an immediate contribution to the team to help us is not without merit. It does have merit. But you have to take a look at it from his perspective. He's trying to do what is best to the team long term, not just trying to do stuff that is going to help it out right now and then leave us potentially in a bad situation later on down the road. That is SOL mindset. Hey, let's just abandon everything long term for short-term success, short-term gratification. That's what Brad Holmes is doing. He's playing the long-term game. And I know that's infuriating to some Lions fans right now because it's like, listen, we're successful right now. Let's make sure we can have that success be continued for the rest of the season. I would much rather go with the prospect of, hey, we have success right now. Let's make sure we can maintain it for the next 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. That's my thought process. And I guarantee you, that's Brad Holmes' thought process. But again, I wanted to make sure that I talked about this because this is becoming a much more larger problem. It's becoming a much more larger issue for Lions fans because they're like, okay, why are we not making trades? Why are we not making acquisitions that could really help this team out? So that's why I decided to bring it up. That's why I decided to talk about it. I tried to be as fair as I possibly could. I know some people are probably going to still say that I'm not being fair, but I'm trying to be as equally fair to both sides as I possibly can here. You can make the decision on who's more to blame here. Is it Aaron Glenn for not using the players and making them in the best ways to fit his scheme or putting them in places to help the scheme out? Is it because of Brad Holmes not making acquisitions and risking it all to bring in somebody that could help us out? There's arguments on both sides of the fence here. You just have to figure out which one makes more sense to you. For me, I still put the blame primarily at Aaron Glenn because he's the coach. Brad Holmes has gotten him talent. He's just not been able to do anything damn well with it. But again, that's my opinion. What's yours? But with that having been said, I think I've done a pretty good job of explaining my position, explaining the facts, and explaining the logic and reason. So with that being said, I just want to say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode I got coming after this one. I also encourage y'all please to do one of these three things: like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you've subscribed in the past, you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and you not had a chance to do so, I want to encourage y'all again, please subscribe. It helps me out, and I'm ever so thankful for every subscription that I gain. But I also want to encourage y'all, after you subscribe, make sure you also hit that bell notification icon as well, so that way you guys never miss any more content that I push out. Again, I want to make sure you guys keep coming back because it helps me out, it helps the channel grow, and I always look forward to your comments, even if I don't necessarily agree with them. I also want to encourage y'all, please, to share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere you can with everybody and anybody that you can. Again, it helps out the channel, it helps me out, and I'm ever so thankful for it. And with that being said, I just want to say thank you all for your view, thank you all for your patience, thank you all for your support. If I hadn't gained your subscription and I just did, welcome into the family. I'm ever so thankful for you. And if I still haven't gained your subscription, hopefully I'll get you on the next try. But with that being said, I just want to say God bless to everybody, and until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.